It was just after 9 p.m. when I heard the front door open. I was half-sprawled on the couch, the TV flashing muted headlines while a local anchor ran through the usual evening news. I wasn't really watching. My eyes kept flicking to the clock, then to the front door, then to my phone, half hoping, half dreading a text. Holly had said she'd be home late, something about dinner with new friends from work. That was the exact phrase she'd used, new friends. It sounded off to me. I couldn't explain why, just that it didn't feel like something she would normally say. When she finally came in, she had this energy to her, loud, bouncy, almost like someone trying too hard to seem natural. She laughed at nothing, called out, "Hey babe," like she was performing the role of a cheerful wife in a commercial. Her heels clicked on the hardwood as she moved quickly through the living room, like she didn't want to linger long enough for me to get a good look at her. "Sorry it ran late," she said over her shoulder, already halfway down the hall. "We stayed for drinks. You know how it is when you actually meet cool people at work for once." I didn't say much. I just made a sound that could pass for agreement. She was already gone into the bedroom, the door clicking softly shut behind her. I didn't know what I expected to feel, relief that she was home, maybe. But instead, there was this low hum in my chest. Not quite anger, not sadness either. Just unease. It had been building for weeks, maybe longer, but I kept brushing it off. Holly had been different lately, but I convinced myself it was just stress. She'd said work was getting intense, that she had more client meetings, more late hours, more commitments. And she'd started going out more, girls' nights, work dinners, self-care weekends. I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid. But tonight, something felt different. I shifted on the couch, and that's when I noticed her phone. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, screen side up. It must have slipped from her purse when she came in. I wouldn't normally snoop, I've never been that guy, but it buzzed, and my eyes went to it out of instinct. A notification slid across the screen from her cloud backup app. It was syncing a new photo. My heart ticked up a beat and I leaned forward without thinking. It was a still image, Holly in a navy blue dress I didn't recognize, leaning close into a man I'd never seen before. They were seated in a cozy-looking restaurant booth, arms around each other like they belonged that way. The second notification hit a few seconds later and my stomach twisted. It was a video auto-synced like the first. The preview showed Holly laughing, her fingers picking at something on her plate before she leaned across the table and offered it to the man. He took it from her hand without hesitation. Like it was normal. Like they'd done it before. That was the moment something in me stopped. I didn't tap on it. I didn't need to. The preview alone was enough. There was a softness in her eyes I hadn't seen in months. A genuine warmth that had been missing when she looked at me. And it was there now for him. For a moment I didn't move. I just stared. The light from the TV blinked across the darkened room, casting shadows on the walls. I was holding my breath and didn't even know it. Then I heard her voice again, this time closer. "Hey," she said casually as she re-entered the living room, now barefoot and wearing her favorite sweats and hoodie. She always changed after going out, said it helped her shed the day. But now it felt like she was shedding someone else entirely. She followed my gaze toward the kitchen, saw her phone still lit up, and I swear I saw something flicker across her face just for a split second. A pause. Like her mind raced to figure out if I had seen something and how much. "Oh," she said with a tight little laugh, moving quickly past me. "My phone. Forgot where I put it." She picked it up like it was nothing and instantly locked the screen. Then, almost too quickly, she turned and plopped down next to me on the couch. I could still smell her perfume, something new and expensive, not the usual light citrus scent I was used to. "How was your day?" she asked brightly, pulling her knees up and tucking them under her. "Anything exciting in the news?" I didn't respond right away. I was staring at the muted TV, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. My pulse hadn't slowed. I could feel it pounding in my temples, like my body hadn't quite caught up to what my eyes had just seen. She nudged me with her elbow. "Earth to Trevor." I glanced at her, and for a second I couldn't speak. Her face was turned toward me, that same bright expression still plastered on like a mask. She was pretending everything was fine. That bothered me more than anything else. Finally, I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said, voice flat. "Just the usual." She smiled and looked back toward the TV. "I swear, the world's falling apart out there." "Seems like it," I muttered. She didn't seem to notice the tone. Or maybe she was choosing not to. Either way, she kept talking, some story about a coworker messing up an email campaign. I listened with half an ear, but I wasn't really hearing her. I was still seeing that image, the way she leaned into that man like he was hers. How effortlessly she laughed around him. How she touched him without hesitation. As she kept talking, I noticed her body language, open, expressive, animated. It was all so performative. Like she was working extra hard to seem normal, but the timing was off. Her smiles came a second too late. Her jokes felt forced. The room was filled with a kind of artificial warmth, like standing under a heat lamp instead of feeling the sun. After a few minutes, she stood and stretched. "I'm wiped," she said, yawning. "I think I'm gonna crash early. You staying up?" "Yeah, probably." She leaned down and kissed my cheek. I didn't lean into it. She didn't say anything else. Just padded off toward the hallway, leaving me alone in the dim glow of the living room. The door to our bedroom clicked shut a few seconds later. I sat there, staring at the dark screen of the TV, which had gone idle. The light from her phone was gone. So was the sound of her voice. But my mind was wide awake. I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to see. And now I couldn't unsee it. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. I lay on my back in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the fan overhead. Beside me, Holly slept soundly. Or pretended to. I couldn't tell anymore. Her breathing was steady, maybe a little too steady, like someone trying to mimic the rhythm of real sleep. I didn't move. I didn't even roll over. I just lay there, stiff and wide-eyed, trying to make sense of what I'd seen earlier on her phone. The image kept flashing in my head, the dress, the booth, the way she smiled at that man. The kind of smile that used to be just for me. My mind wouldn't shut off. Instead, it started running through a checklist. Tiny moments I'd dismissed over the last few months began stringing themselves together like a trail I'd been too distracted to follow. The first breadcrumb? Probably the perfume. About 2 months ago, Holly started wearing something new. At first, I thought it was just a sample from a subscription box. She loved those, but when I asked, she said a client had given it to her as a gift. I remember thinking it was a weird kind of gift for a business relationship. It smelled expensive, rich and floral, something you'd wear to impress, not just to feel good around the office. I didn't question it then. I even complimented her on it. God, that makes me feel stupid now. Then there was the second bank account. That happened not long after the perfume switch. She said it was for managing her freelance marketing gigs, something about separating client payments from her salary. Made sense at the time. Holly had always been financially independent, and I respected that. But she started getting secretive. Passwords changed. Alerts stopped coming through our shared email. She used to joke about her spreadsheets and savings goals. Suddenly, she didn't want to talk money at all. Still, I brushed it off. Because that's what you do when you trust someone, right? You don't jump to conclusions. You assume they're telling the truth. But then there was the Baltimore trip. Or at least, what was supposed to be Baltimore. She had packed light, just a carry-on and her laptop. Said she was attending a weekend summit for women in media. She sent me photos from what looked like a conference room, rows of chairs, some generic keynote speaker standing at a podium. I remember smiling, thinking it was cool that she was putting herself out there. But 3 days later, I got a fraud alert from the credit card company. I thought someone had stolen her info. I called her in a panic. "It's fine," she said, brushing it off like it was no big deal. "I used the wrong card. Just a mix-up." The charge had been for a boutique hotel in Richmond, not Baltimore. I pushed back a little and she snapped. Said I was acting paranoid, controlling. That she didn't need me policing where she stayed or how she managed her trips. So I dropped it. But it stuck with me. That charge. That tone. That sudden wall between us. And now, lying there in the dark, I finally saw it for what it was. That weekend hadn't been work-related. It had been personal. An asterisk mate. Probably with him. Whoever he was. I didn't know his name yet, but I could picture his face clearly enough from the photo. Tall, beard just long enough to look trendy, not lazy. Sharp shirt. Confident posture. He looked like someone comfortable in places like candlelit restaurants, someone who knew how to say the right things and mean none of them. Someone who made women feel seen. And Holly? She looked smitten. My stomach twisted. There were other things, too. A few weeks ago, she came home from a late meeting and left her gym bag in the car. I'd gone out the next morning to get something from the glove box and caught the scent the second I opened the door. Not sweat, not chlorine from the pool. It was cologne. Not mine. I asked about it later. She said it was probably from the Uber driver. Right? That same week, I noticed she'd stopped sharing her location with me on our phones. It used to be automatic, part of our shared calendar app. Then one day, the feature was just off. I asked her about it and she blamed an update. Said it was just a glitch. The same glitch that changed all her social media settings to private. The same glitch that meant she started getting texts late at night from contacts saved only with initials. The dots weren't hard to connect anymore. At some point, I must have drifted into a shallow, restless sleep because when I opened my eyes again, it was light out. Holly was gone, the bed beside me empty and cold. Her scent lingered on the sheets, perfume, and something else I couldn't place. Her phone was gone, too. Not that I expected otherwise. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table in silence, staring at nothing. The house felt foreign. It was the same layout, the same furniture we picked together from IKEA and West Elm sales, the same sunlight streaming through the kitchen blinds, but it felt hollow now. Like a replica of our life, not the real thing. That morning, I didn't go to work. I called in and said I had a migraine. Which wasn't a lie. My head did hurt badly. But it was more emotional than physical. A kind of ache that settled in my chest and refused to move. I pulled out my laptop. Not hers, mine. I didn't even touch hers yet. I wasn't ready for that. But I started reviewing my own digital life, looking for gaps. Clues. Old calendar entries, receipts, emails. I even checked our old text threads from months ago, trying to pinpoint when exactly things began to shift. There was a pattern. Not a neat one, but it was there. A subtle erosion. We used to send each other playlists. Inside jokes. Funny memes, random photos, quick I love yous during lunch breaks. That stopped in early spring. Replaced by logistical notes. Grocery lists. A reminder to take the trash out. I had stopped saying I miss you because she had stopped responding when I did. That realization hurt more than I expected. I couldn't tell when it turned into something physical with this other guy. Maybe it hadn't yet. Maybe it had. But even if it was just emotional, which I doubted, it was still betrayal. The Macy I once had with her was now being given to someone else. In secret. In silence. That afternoon, she texted me around 1. Holly, crazy day? Client pushed my whole schedule around. Might be late again. Love you too, hearts. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Me, got it. Be safe. No heart. No, I love you too. She didn't notice. Or didn't care. That night, I sat on the back porch, beer in hand, watching the sky fade from pink to dark gray. I remember the early days, those first 2 years when we couldn't get enough of each other. Sunday morning bagels. Movie marathons on the couch. Fighting over where to hang that stupid painting we bought from the street fair. She used to laugh with me. Really laugh. Now she laughed with someone else. The cracks were no longer invisible. They were loud, sharp, and spreading fast. And for the first time, I let myself think the unthinkable. This marriage might already be over. The next morning, Holly left early. She said she had a spa morning with a coworker she barely ever mentioned before. It was last minute, apparently some birthday deal they got on a Groupon. I nodded from behind my coffee mug and wished her a good time. She gave me a quick kiss on the forehead, one hand already on the doorknob. She didn't notice or didn't acknowledge that I didn't kiss her back. The moment I heard her car pull away from the driveway, I put my mug down. I didn't want to do what I was about to do. I swear I didn't. But I couldn't keep pretending. Not after everything I'd seen. I wasn't some paranoid husband watching shadows. I'd seen the video. I'd felt the distance. I'd watched my marriage slowly unspool in front of me. And her laptop was sitting right there on the dining table. Open. Idle. Waiting. I stood behind the chair for a long moment before sitting down, hands hovering over the trackpad. I told myself I was just going to check one thing. Just to ease the noise in my head. I clicked. The desktop was clean, too clean. A handful of folders. Some invoices. A few PDFs named things like client deck _final and Q3 _pitches. All surface level. It was the same kind of clean you do when you know someone might be watching. But then I saw the Photos app icon bouncing in the dock like it had been syncing or recently used. I clicked. First, nothing seemed out of place. A few selfies, some random food sh*ts, screensh *ts of product reviews. Then I scrolled back. Past last week. Past the Baltimore not Baltimore weekend. Further. That's when the album titled Shared Cloud Auto Backup caught my eye. It wasn't locked. She hadn't thought to hide it. The first few images were harmless enough. Conference snaps *ts, event flyers. But as I clicked deeper, the tone changed. A photo of Holly at a hotel rooftop bar. Cocktail in her hand. Golden hour light catching her cheekbones. Her hair done in a way I hadn't seen in months. She was glowing. Alone in the *t. But the glass beside hers was half full. Someone else's hand just barely in frame. Next was a boomerang of her clinking glasses with someone. Only their wrists were visible. But then came the full images. Dozens of them. In restaurants, lounges, parks, even what looked like a museum. The same man kept appearing. Tall, well-kept beard, sharp jawline. always smiling, sometimes with his arm around her waist, sometimes holding her hand across the table. In one, she was leaning into his shoulder while he kissed the top of her head. My chest tightened. This wasn't casual. This wasn't new. This wasn't innocent. This was something real. I kept scrolling. There were videos, too. Snippets of hotel rooms, clinking room service trays, him handing her a white robe while she giggled and took the phone back to show off their view. One clip was of her brushing her teeth. Him behind her in the mirror with his arms wrapped around her waist. She filmed it like they were newlyweds. And they weren't hiding. They just weren't hiding it from each other. I stared at the screen, frozen. My hands felt numb. My brain couldn't catch up with the speed at which the truth was crashing down around me. Then I saw the folder. Jason's speech balloon. It was a messages archive. A message threads exported and saved. Maybe synced from her phone. I clicked. The first line hit me like a brick. Jason, last night was everything. You're magic. Holly, you make me feel like I've been sleepwalking until now. That was dated 2 months ago. There were hundreds of messages. Long ones. Voice notes. He called her Sunshine. She called him Jay. They joked about getting caught. She said she hated pretending around me. That being home felt like acting in someone else's movie. They talked about weekends, road trips, songs that reminded them of each other. They traded Spotify links and private jokes. They planned a weekend in Asheville, disguised as a team-building retreat. In one message, Jason asked if she thought I suspected anything. She replied, "If he does, he's not saying. Trevor doesn't like conflict." I felt sick, like my body had stopped belonging to me. I copied the folder. Every photo, every video, every message. I transferred everything to an external hard drive I hadn't touched since grad school. I encrypted it, password protected it, saved a backup in the cloud under a disguised folder. I didn't cry. Not then. There was no room for tears, only logistics. After that, I did something I never thought I'd do. I Googled Jason Miller. It didn't take long. He was tagged in one of the videos. An Instagram reel Holly had uploaded and then quickly deleted, but apparently it had synced to her backup. His profile was public, or partially public, enough for me to gather the essentials. He was a wellness coach, of course, worked at a mid-sized gym chain, held weekly sessions on intentional living and emotional alignment. One of those guys who wore Henleys and talked about breathwork like it was a spiritual gift. He had a dog, a Jeep, and a self-published book about rewiring your soul. I scanned his photos. A few were taken in places I now recognized. Places Holly had said she'd been on assignment. One was even captioned, "Weekend reset with someone who gets it." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe how careless they'd been. How confident. They thought I'd never look. That I was too mild, too trusting. That I'd go on believing the script they handed me. They were wrong. I closed the laptop and sat still for a long time. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses in from the walls. The kind that tells you, this life as you know it is over. And they don't even know it yet. There's a strange thing that happens when the shock fades. Not peace. Not acceptance. Just clarity. Cold and clinical. Like your mind detaches itself from your chest and goes, okay, time to fix what's broken. That's how I felt after I closed Holly's laptop. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't even touch my phone. I just sat there, staring at the dining room wall, trying to remember if we had any packing boxes left in the garage. My marriage had a slow leak for months, maybe years, and now the hull had cracked. The water was rushing in fast, but I wasn't going down with it. Not quietly. Not this time. That afternoon I made a list. It started simple. Secure copies of everything. Find a lawyer. Separate finances. Document everything. Get out. No emotion. Just bullet points. Tasks. A to-do list for the end of a life I once built with love. First, I backed up everything again, redundant copies across cloud storage, flash drives, and that dusty external drive I hadn't touched in years. I created a hidden folder under a fake name in my private email. Even password protected it with a code Holly wouldn't guess, an old street we lived on when we were dating. It felt symbolic somehow. The version of us before it all began to fall apart. Then I bought a camera. Not the kind you mount in plain sight, the kind you order quietly, small enough to hide. Discreet, motion activated. I installed it in the den, pointed at the entryway, angled just enough to catch the kitchen and hallway in frame. It was easy to explain security for the packages we kept having stolen. That was our running joke, porch pirates. She wouldn't question it. I even tested it. Twice. The quality was good. It synced to my phone automatically. I made sure the notification sounds were muted. Nothing left to chance. Next, I called an attorney. Not a friend of a friend. A real one. A top-rated divorce attorney in the city who didn't ask for the juicy details up front. I scheduled a consultation under a fake name just to be safe. Then came the financial part. We had a joint checking account and 2 credit cards we used for household expenses. Holly had her own savings and, as I recently learned, a second checking account tied to her freelance work. I started untangling myself quietly. I opened a new checking account in my name, moved my direct deposit over, and began transferring a little each day. Not enough to trigger alarm. Just enough to reclaim my space. I didn't want revenge, I wanted control. My own financial oxygen mask. I also opened a P.O. box. I told the guy at the counter it was for work. He didn't care. I just needed a safe place for my new banking information and future legal documents to land. Somewhere Holly wouldn't find them by accident. Then I looked for a place. An apartment. Nothing fancy. Just a 1-bedroom somewhere quiet, clean, and on the opposite side of town. I told the leasing office it was temporary housing for a work relocation. They didn't ask many questions. I signed the lease that same afternoon and scheduled the move for 2 weeks out. In between work meetings, I started boxing up essentials. Just the basics, tools, clothes, important documents, mementos that still felt mine. I moved them slowly over several trips, keeping everything locked in my car or stashed at the new place. Holly never noticed. Or if she did, she didn't say anything. She was too distracted, I guess. Her phone buzzed constantly now. At dinner. In bed. In the car. Always face down, always with that subtle flick of her finger when a message came in. Sometimes she'd excuse herself to the bathroom and come back 10 minutes later, glowing. Other times she'd lock herself in the bedroom to take client calls. I stopped asking. Let her think I was slipping. It made my exit easier. The less I pushed, the more careless she got. One night, she left her email open on the iPad. I didn't even have to go looking, there it was. A reservation confirmation. A cabin 2 hours away. A weekend in October. Booked under his name. The message said, can't wait to spend the whole weekend without hiding. Just you and me. I took a screenshot. Saved it. Filed it away. It was all becoming so methodical. I felt like I was running a covert operation in my own house. Every interaction with her became performance art. I smiled when she smiled. I kissed her forehead when she looked sad. I asked how her day was, like nothing was wrong. She never suspected. She even said once, you've been so chill lately. I feel like we're finally getting back to normal. I almost laughed. Normal. If only she knew. My lawyer called that Friday. She'd reviewed everything I sent over. The photos. The screenshot. The messages. She said the case was strong, very strong. Adultery wasn't always easy to prove cleanly, but what I had was airtight. I asked her, do I need to confront her first? She said, only if you want to. But you don't have to. You're building your exit on your terms now. That line stuck with me. My terms. The old me would have confronted Holly the second I found that video. The old me would have thrown the laptop across the room, demanded answers, cried in the middle of the kitchen. But I wasn't that man anymore. She had trained me out of emotional response. Out of reaction. I'd become quiet. Calculated. That was her doing. And now it was going to be my P***N. I kept gathering. One day, while she was out on another client dinner, I found a notebook in her nightstand. Not a planner, a journal. She used to keep one years ago, back when we were both reading self-help books and talking about intentional living. I didn't know she'd started again. I opened it. I shouldn't have. But I did. The entries were revealing. She wrote about Jason. A lot. She called him New Air. She said he reminded her of who she used to be. There was an entire page titled, What Life Could Look Like, a Dream List. And I was nowhere on it. It talked about getting a dog, hiking out west, starting a coaching podcast together. I closed the journal. Not out of guilt, but because I'd read enough. That night, I stared at her across the dinner table while she told me a story about her coworker's engagement. She laughed at the proposal video. Said she didn't want a big show like that. I nodded and smiled. Ate my food. And imagined how I'd leave. I wasn't just going to hand her a box of evidence and walk away. I was going to make it clean. Sharp. Undeniable. One morning while she was in the shower, I placed a photo in her work tote. Just one. The one of her feeding Jason at that restaurant, the same one that showed up on my phone the night this all began. I didn't say anything. Didn't leave a note. I just tucked it between two folders. I wanted to see if she'd bring it up. She didn't. She came home that night unusually quiet. A little pale. She made tea and didn't speak during dinner. Her smile was brittle. Her eyes darted too much. I knew she saw it. She knew I knew. But neither of us said a word. That silence said everything. A week later, I scheduled the final meeting with my lawyer. We set the date for delivery. Holly would receive the divorce petition by courier. It would arrive with a receipt for her to sign. Quiet. Formal. Professional. It would include copies of everything I'd found. There would be no fight. Only truth. On paper. In black and white. I stood in our living room that night, watching her scroll through her phone, legs folded under her like we were still a normal couple. She looked peaceful. Content. Unaware. And I realized something. She was already gone. The woman I married, the one who used to hum while brushing her teeth, who sent me dumb memes at 2 a.m., who used to cry during Pixar movies, she wasn't sitting across from me anymore. That woman had disappeared months ago. All that was left was her echo. And I was done chasing it. The day I chose to end it was a Thursday. It felt like any other morning. She was in the kitchen, humming something off-key while pouring almond milk into her coffee. Wearing the green robe I bought her 3 birthdays ago, the one with the fraying sleeve. The smell of toast and cinnamon drifted into the hallway. For a second, one cruel, beautiful second, it almost felt normal. But it wasn't. The courier had already come. The documents were delivered by 8 a.m., signed for at her office by a receptionist who probably had no idea what she was handing over. It was a thick envelope. Inside, divorce petition, grounds for dissolution, evidentiary exhibits A through J. I didn't go to work that day. I stayed home. Sat in the living room staring out at our front yard. It had just rained. The grass looked brighter than usual, like the world was trying to remind me that life would keep going after this. I waited. Around 5:30, I heard her key turn in the lock. The door opened slowly like she already knew. She stepped inside, hesitated, then closed it behind her with too much care. I stayed seated on the couch. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, tote bag in one hand, envelope in the other. It was unopened. She looked at it like it might bite her. Her mouth opened, then closed again. "You got it," I said, my voice calm. Flat. "Trevor," she started, but the rest didn't come. Just my name hanging in the space between us. I gestured toward the kitchen table. On it sat my laptop, open. A slideshow of photos flicked through the screen on a loop, each one time-stamped, labeled. Her and Jason. Her alone in hotel rooms. Message screensh *TS. One by one. She walked over slowly, her eyes fixed to the screen. Her face turned white. I watched her hands tremble as she set the envelope down and placed both palms on the table to steady herself. She didn't sit. She didn't move. Just stared at the screen. "You documented everything," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did. Even the texts?" I nodded. "And the emails. And the cabin reservation. And the journal entry about leaving me." That one stopped her cold. Her eyes flicked to me, wide now, raw. "You read that? You left it unlocked in the nightstand," I said. Page 15. What life could look like. I'm not in it. She sank into the chair across from me. Her whole body seemed to collapse inward, like she was trying to disappear without actually moving. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she said, her voice cracking. I tilted my head. "Then what was supposed to happen, Holly?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted toward the screen again. The image had changed, now showing her feeding Jason from her plate at the restaurant. The same video I saw the first night I realized something was wrong. I let it play. "I didn't mean to fall for him," she said finally, voice small. "I didn't even know I had until it was too late." I laughed short, humorless. "You didn't know you were flying out of town with him? Booking hotel rooms? Writing that you felt like you were sleepwalking before you met him?" Her eyes shut. "I was lost, Trevor. I didn't know who I was anymore." "No," I said, my voice sharp now. "You just didn't like who you were with me." She looked up, eyes glassy. "You didn't feel lost. You felt bored." She opened her mouth to protest, but I kept going. "You wanted something new. Exciting. Someone to tell you that you were radiant and rare and misunderstood. Someone who didn't have history with you, just fantasy. Trevor, I'm not angry, I said, cutting her off. That's the worst part. I was angry. Weeks ago. When I found the photos. When I read your messages calling me predictable. When you said being around me felt like an obligation wrapped in comfort. She flinched. But now, I said, shrugging, I'm done. I've been done. Tears started to slip from her eyes now, slow and silent. The kind of crying where someone doesn't want to be seen breaking but can't stop the cracks. Do you really want this? She asked. Just to throw away everything we had? I raised an eyebrow. You're asking me that? It didn't mean she started, but I cut her off again. Don't, I said quietly. Don't say it didn't mean anything. I've seen the videos. I've read the messages. It meant something. Maybe more than you're willing to admit. But don't insult me by pretending otherwise. She looked down, hands gripping the edge of the table like she might fall out of her own skin. I made a mistake, she said, her voice cracking. A huge one. I was selfish. I was scared. But I never stopped loving you. No, I said. You stopped a long time ago. You just didn't tell me. Silence settled in the room. The slideshow continued its slow cycle, image after image of a life I was never part of. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her robe even though it was already damp. Can't we try counseling? At least once? Don't we owe that to what we had? I shook my head slowly. Counseling only works when both people want to fix something. You didn't want to fix it. You wanted to escape it. She sniffled, trying to compose herself. You didn't notice I was drowning. Because you never said a word. You smiled. You joked. You kissed me goodnight after texting him. You pretended. That's not on me. Her lips quivered. Please, Trevor. Don't end us like this. I stood. She looked up at me like I had a knife in my hand. We've already ended, I said. I'm just the one finally saying it out loud. She followed me to the door, stumbling behind as if afraid that if she lost sight of me, I'd vanish. Where are you going? She asked. I moved out 2 days ago, I said, pulling my keys from the hook. The rest of my things are already gone. I just stayed long enough to hand you the truth. I pulled a smaller envelope from my jacket and placed it in her hand. Inside, a letter from my lawyer outlining the next steps, the mediation schedule, and a summary of assets we'd beg asterisk and separating. Neatly itemized. She looked down at it like it was burning her. You didn't even give me a chance to fight, she whispered. You fought, Holly. Just not for me. I opened the door and stepped outside. The sun was beginning to set. Our street, once the background of my favorite memories, looked unfamiliar in the orange light. Quiet. Still. Detached. She called my name once, soft and shaky. I turned back. Her eyes were red. Her face blotchy. The robe hung off her like she didn't know what to do with her body anymore. I'm sorry, she said again. I nodded once. I believe you. Then I closed the door behind me. I didn't look back. I drove to the apartment I now called home. It was small. Sparse. A futon, a table, a mattress on the floor. But it was clean. And quiet. And mine. That night, I didn't check my phone. I didn't cry. I slept with the windows open, the air cold against my skin. And for the first time in months, I didn't dream about her.